welcome, and we are still, of course, in Parsha vaYetzei, and we'll get right into the share, and I'll start with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And it's at this point that we read the chapter which deals with the birth of the 12 tribes, right? And we have the two wives, Rachel and Leah. Leah, who is very fertile, and Rachel, who is unable to conceive. And so we've gone through a number of the children. The last time we read about it was that you might say, I don't know if I can say in desperation, but regardless, Rachel goes to Jacob and says, essentially, the end of the conversation is she offers her handmaid Bilhah to Jacob so that she can have sons or children as well. All right. So at that point, there are two children born. Okay. And let's make sure can go on to let's make sure who they are. Naphtali is one of them, and Dan is the other, right? Dan and Naphtali are the children born of Bilhah. Well, but so Leah sees this, and she sees that she is no longer conceiving, and so she takes her Zilpah, her handmaid, and offers her to Jacob as well, and Zilpah gives birth to a child, and Leah says, "Ba God." This is the last verse that we did the last time, and in other words, luck, right? Something like that. Although this word "ba God," the fact that it could be "ba God," right? "Ba God," two words. Luck has arrived, or "bagad," which can mean something else, right? It can also mean treachery of some kind, and Rashi explained in yesterday's lesson, or our last lesson, about that. So going on. So she has a second child, right? Second son. But Tomer and Leah says, Tomer Leah, Ba'ashri, or Ba'oshri. And it may be the fact that this aleph, right, like this, is because it's double, could be ba ashri, my fortune has come, ki ishruni banot, for daughters, the daughters will deem me fortunate, right? In other words, my contemporaries. Vatikra ichmo Asher, and she named him Asher. Let's see if we've got a Rashi on this. I'm looking to see. No Rashi for this. However, let's see something else. I noticed the Targum, right? Here we go. Look at how the Targum tries to be so helpful in situations where the Hebrew is somewhat hard to determine. Tushbachta havatli, right? Um, Fortune has come to me. Yes, Bart, you want to come off
I
mute?
muted. Yes, I
Yeah,
am
go ahead.
muted.
Go ahead.
Is this like a lot of times in English, I'll go no pun intended, and
Yeah,
sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. Or do you think these multiple interpretations could be intended?
yes, I do. My assumption of the Torah is it is very, very deep literature. In other words, that there is such a thing as a literary approach to language. And because this is a written text, right? There's a written text that there's a lot of intentionality. But it's clear if you go back and look at the other names, how the naming of a child is connected somehow to either their conception or the situation in the world at the time, or some other circumstance, and that is in a way indicative of what the name will be. And so yes, it is an intentional play on words, no question about it. There's a Hebrew expression, kishmo kain hu, like his name, so is he. There's a Latin expression, nomen omen, that one's name is an omen as to one's fortune, as to one's future, etc. So yes. So
Okay, thank you.
right. So going on. So Vayelech Reuven b'mek tzir chitim. Reuben went during the days of the wheat harvest, right? Vayimtza dudaim. And he found very often this word dudaim because it's referring to some kind of plant, right? So here it says mandrakes, right? That's a translation I've often found, and I'm going to see if I can add to the share. So I may need to stop the share. Let's see if I can do this. Can I? No. No, that's okay. I'll stop the share for a moment and see what I can do to get something as well. I'm going to add to the share and see if I get it. Sometimes this doesn't come up the way oh, there it did. Wonderful. You should be able to see it. These are mandrakes. Look at that. Got some other pictures of them too. I'm assuming, oh, look at this right here. Look at them. So there is a reason why they had something to do with fertility right here. Look at this. Hmm. All
Those
right.
are vegetables.
Yep, it's a type of vegetable, indeed.
Do they
Indeed.
sell them in the stores?
Um, yeah, I think you can. That I think they're expensive. I don't know if they're in stores, but you can get almost anything online these days. So, that's something to consider. Let me see what I can do now to get back into Zoom here. And 1 second. Oops, sorry. I want to get back into the text. I can. It's not helping me here. Can you see the text now?
Yeah, yeah.
Good. Okay, back in the text. Thank you. Thank you. All right, that's great. So that's how it's translated. Anyway, Reuben finds these mandrakes. And by the way, Dudaim also refers to, the word David, right? The word David can refer to beloved, right? So this has some kind of effect, right? Basadeh in the field, vaYetzei18 el Leah imo, and he brought them to Leah, his mother. I think the reason he might have done this is because I think the family, and Reuben in particular, was very aware of how his mother was treated by Jacob. Not
Mm.
necessarily cruelly, but that here she was, the elder of the two sisters, and yet it says, we're told very clearly that Jacob was completely in love with Rachel. And the fact is, of course, had circumstances played out differently, he would have wound up with one wife, Rachel. That's it. But here he is, married to Leah, and Reuben is feeling that dynamic going on. So I think that's the force of saying that he brought those mandrakes to Leah, his mother. Vatome Rachel, and Rachel said, El Leah, to Leah, Tnina li midudae b'nech. Please give me from these dudaim, these mandrakes of your son. So let's go back. We've got a Rashi on this to take a look at, right? Right here. Bimei katsir chitim. So again, the commentators look very carefully as to details that don't seem to be necessary. And again, because this is literature and because it's a written text, the question has to be, what was in the mind of the author in putting that in? And as far as I'm concerned, the author is God, right? Because in a sense, if one has a religious outlook to begin with, and if you do believe in a transcendent being, well, everything we do ultimately, whatever talent we have, and so much is actually an expression of the divine in some way or another. So I have my sense is that the authors of this, right, had a really, really, really deep connection, deep spiritual connection. And so they were brilliant. They were talented. We know, of course, of people who seem to have an incredible amount of insight and stuff like that. I mean, we can name names of people, whether they're composers or authors or artists, etc., just have a very amazing perception of reality around us. And so the question here is, what is the force of this Bimei Katsir Chitim? And he found these mandrakes at the time of the wheat harvest. What's the wheat harvest got to do with finding mandrakes? Well, we're going to find out. Lahagid shivchan shel shvatim. This is to indicate, this little phrase is to indicate just how great the tribes were in this particular meaning, of course, the sons of Jacob, that they were really, really fine people. Why? Eight hakatzir haya, because this was the time of the harvest. That's what we're told. It's harvest time. Velo pashat yado begezel, and Reuben didn't help himself to wheat. He didn't. That's not what he was trying to take. He did not steal from the wheat harvest. Lahavi chitim usaorim, in order to bring wheat or barley to his mother, right? He didn't want to touch somebody else's property. Ella, davar hahefker, but something that was ownerless. It's like picking up weeds or something like that, that nobody would make a claim to. She'ein adam makpid bo, because no one really cares about it, right? No person really cares about helping himself to mandrakes, finding mandrakes in the field, right? So that's the force of that little phrase. Dudaim. All right, so now we've got this word that we got to try and deal with. So the Talmud very often translates words in the Torah that are hard to understand into their contemporary language. So in the Tractate Sanhedrin, page 99, sigli, which Jastrow translates as violets, but we'll see. That's not, I think, believe me, I'm not here to cast aspersions on Jastrow, but at any rate, we'll see. Let's see. He says, Esefu, it's a type of herb, Uvelashon Yishmael, and in Arabic, right, in the language of Yishmael, Arabic, Jasmin, Jasmine, it's Jasmine. Well, we also know that jasmine can have an intoxicating fragrance, etc. So that's possibly what it was. We've got the idea of its aphrodisiac qualities. So, Vatomer la. So Leah responds to Rachel and says, Hama'at kachtech et ishi, is it not enough that you have taken my husband? You see this dynamic going on, playing itself through to the very end, this sibling rivalry going on. Well, we know sibling rivalry is a huge, huge theme in Genesis from the beginning with Cain and Abel. And whether or not the Torah has a message to us that the rivalry that goes on in humanity to this very day is actually sibling rivalry. Really is. That if we could see ourselves as a family, as one family, trying to act in compassionate and loving ways, that would be something tremendous. So obviously there's a relationship also to idolatry here, but not here in this particular place, but in general in terms of that theme of sibling rivalry. So isn't it enough that you've taken my husband, v'lakachat gam et duda'e b'ni, and are you coming to also take my son's dudaim? Vatomer Rachel. So Rachel said, Lachen, for this reason, Yishkav imach halayla. He, that is her husband, that is Jacob, will lie with you tonight, tachat duda'e v'nech, in the place, in other words, for the mandrakes of your son. Now, I'm going before, you notice that I made a note up here, but before I go to that, I want to get the Rashi, take a look at the Rashi. Here we go. V'lakachat gam et duda'e b'ni, and to take also my son's mandrakes or jasmine or whatever, b'tamiyah. In other words, and you also want to take my son's mandrakes? You've taken my, you've taken my husband, and you're taking also my son's mandrakes, b'tamiyah. V'la'asot od zot likach, in other words, to do this as well, likach gam et duda'e bini, to take also the mandrakes of my son, v'targumo ula mesav. Mesav. Let's take a look. And that simply means to take. To take. I believe, right? So remember, Rachel says, well, for that reason, you will lie with my husbands tonight. You can have the rights, the conjugal rights tonight. Because it was my turn to be intimate with him tonight. And I'm giving it to you, tachat duda ebnech, in the place of, or for the sake of your son's mandrakes. Ulefi shezilzala b'mishkav hatzadik, and because she made a light thing of lying with this righteous person, this righteous man. Some interesting sort of sub themes that come out of this. Lo zachta likaverin. She did not merit to be buried with him, right? We know that she's buried in Bethlehem, and Jacob is buried with Rachel in the cave of Machpelah. And when I read this is from Tractate Nida, okay, that this can also be understood metaphorically. In other words, Rachel says, for this reason, he will lie with you tonight. Well, we know that night is also a metaphor for death. And this phrase could be understood metaphorically, meaning that when we die, he is going to be with you. Even though that's not the pshat. It's not the pshat. But just the layers of meaning that can be found as you sort of look at things carefully and in a broad sense. Vayavo Yaakov minasadeh ba'erev, and Jacob came from the field in the evening. By the way, again, I suspect there's some kind of meaning here, okay, as to why this is being written like this. Vayetzei Leah likrato, Leah went out to greet him. Vatomer, and she said, Elai tavo, to me you will come. Ki sachor sacharticha, for I have hired you, right? Or indeed I have hired you, beduda ebeni, with my sons dudaim. Vayishkaf ima balaylahu, and on that night he lay with her. So one of the things, of course, that comes out of this is, the women are the ones who basically dictate the intimacy, right? The intimate relations. Just interesting, right? That and just how I think part of that Jacob coming in from the field that evening may be an indication of how Jacob has changed, how his fortunes have changed, right? Because when we read about Jacob in his early years, it's like there's something a little bit uppity about him, right? He's so smart. And here he is being humbled. There's something, maybe, something humbling about the fact that he's working for Laban. He isn't working in the field for himself. He's working for Laban. So here he's hired by Laban. This is his payment. By the way, payment to be able to marry Rachel. And at the same time, he also, in a sense, has been hired. She uses that word. I'm hired you, right? The idea of being hired, a hired hand, right? And of course, we use that in English sometimes in a very insulting kind of way to belittle someone in terms of their status. But I suspect that might be a universal idea. And let's go a little bit further. Vayishma Elohim Leah, and the Lord heard Leah. Vatahar, and so she conceived. I just want to make sure it's yes. Okay. Oh, no, sorry. I got to go back. We didn't do verse 16. Okay, so here we go. Sachor secharticha. right? This double language. Natati l'Rachel schara, right? I gave to Rachel. Schara, hire, right? So schara, usually it's chora, which refers to merchandise, but it's interesting. This feminine form here, right? In other words, maybe it means, I paid her for the conjugal rights for tonight. That's what this is referring to. So that's how Leah is explaining to Jacob why he is to consort with her that evening. Balaylahu, that night. HaKadosh Baruch Hu si'u, right? Siya'u, she'etzei misham Yisachar. So because it makes a mem, right? Let's take a look. He lay with her on that night. Oh, balayla hu, right? So it doesn't say balayla hahu, right, which would be the grammatical form for that night, but rather it says balayla hu, which means on the night he. And that's where Rashi's getting the idea that this he, is referring to God, right? That God made it possible now for Leah to become pregnant, to conceive. Again, look at this. One little letter missing, and it gives rise to an interpretation. Vayishma Elohim et Leah. Right, so we said that God heard Leah, Vatahar, she conceived, Vateled Yaakov ben, and she gave Jacob a son, bore Jacob a son, fifth Chamishi, a fifth son. Ooh. So she actually winds up of the 12 tribes, she is the mother of six. She gives birth to six of them. Vayishma Elohim Leah. The Lord heard Leah. Sometimes the word Yishma can also mean understand, right? To understand. Sometimes it can mean agree. So, Shahaita mitava. He heard, he understood that she was deeply desirous, right? Mitave, she had a ta'ava, right? Umachaziret laharbot shvatim, and she was constantly seeking to multiply the number of children that he had. In other words, shvatim, the tribes. Vatomer Leah, and Leah said, Natan Elohim schari, God has given me my payment, my dues, my hire. Asher natati shivchati leishi, in that I gave my maidservant to my husband, Vatikra Shmo Yisachar, and he was called Yisachar. So, of course, if you look at this, it looks like Yisachar, but it's never pronounced that way. And the fact that there's no vowel underneath the second sin, it's just pronounced as one letter, Yisachar. Let's take a look here. Okay, onwards to the next verse. Vatahar od Leah, and Leah again conceived. Vateled ben Shishi Yaakov, and so it's actually Vateled vein Shishi Yaakov, and she gave birth to a sixth son to Jacob. Vatomer Leah, and Leah said, Zavadani Elohim oti zevet tov. God has presented me with a great good present. Hapam, and this time, Yizbaleni Ishi, my husband, Yizbaleni. We'll see what that means. Again, an unusual Hebrew word. Jastrow says it's entertain liberally, something like that. Ki yaladati lo shisha vanim, because I have given birth to six sons for him. Vatikra et shmo. You can imagine what it's going to be. Zebulon. She called him Zebulon. Right? So Issachar and Zebulun are sons 5 and 6 to Leah. So Zevid Tov. Let's take a look. Gonna see what it says. Okay. Here we go. Yahav Hashem. No, that's yeah. I'm gonna make sure I got the right place. Right. Yahav li, right, that Lord has given me. Yate li cholak tav, a good portion. Hadazimna Yahe, and here we go. Medore Devali. This time, the habitation, Medore Devali, my husband's habitation, Levati, will be with me. Areyulediti le shitavani, because I have borne 6 sons to him. So again, Targum trying to come to the rescue. So this is Zeventov, he's saying, right? It's chavak, it's a portion, right? A portion. But let's keep going. Then we've got Yizbaleni, Lashon Beitzvul. So this reference Beitzvul, a residence. Yes, Bart.
Do women not matter if you have daughters? I mean,
Okay, they matter. It's in a different sense, right? Because basically the inheritance of land and things like that was passed down through the male line. It's not that women never had property, but by and large, the men were held responsible for the property. And so women were at that point were they primarily had very large families. As you can see, they had very large families. And so the household responsibilities were huge. They did not have washing machines. They didn't have dishwashers. They didn't have electricity. And so taking care of domestic chores became a major issue. And I think that just the realities of life at that point, that the men were responsible for protecting the women and for making sure that they brought they brought the food, provided the food, etc. And the women took care of the children, raising the children, and taking care of the home. So essentially, property was distributed. When it came to laws of inheritance, the inheritance, generally speaking, went to the men. So it's of course a whole big issue, and life has changed for us. There are factors that have taken place, which give women a much larger opportunity to take part in the general social life and in society these days. So
okay, thank you.
circumstances alter cases, right? So let's keep going. Okay, so a habitation, right? Beitzvul, and there's this French word. Lauren, I know sometimes you have the French written out. Are you there?
Yeah, it says Herberjerie.
Oh, do you know what I think? Isn't there a term auberge in modern French, which
Well,
refers
aubergine
to
is an eggplant.
no, no, no. I'm thinking
Auberge is an inn.
an inn. Yes, exactly. Auberge is an inn. And so likewise, a place, I wonder if this particular French word is related to it. Notice, by the way, that the Yiddish herberge, a hostel, that's what it is. So an inn or a hostel.
Yeah,
Beit,
it says dwelling house
right,
here.
place of dwelling, right. Me'ata, and this he's now pushing it into the verse, right? Me'ata lo tahe ikar dirato, from now on, his main place of residence, that is Jacob, right? Ela imi, will be with me. Sheyeshli banim keneged kol nashav, because I now have sons in equivalent to all his wives, meaning, each wife she knows that ultimately he's going to have 12 children, and she realizes that she has 6 of them. So she has exactly half of all the sons he's going to have. But again, behind all of this, I think, is this pathos going on of Leah's longing for Jacob, and feeling that she doesn't get it. The love she wants from Jacob, which she doesn't get. She doesn't feel she ever seems to get enough, right? Or that she gets it at all. So let's see. I think this is a good point at which to stop. Let me go to the next one. Okay, so this is where we will stop for now. And I will take the, there we go. All right. I'll stop the share. Okay. Well, thank you very, very much. And I'm going to stop the recording.